In the year 48 BC, as Julius Caesar's legions clashed with Egyptian forces in the streets of Alexandria, something far more catastrophic than the fall of kingdoms was unfolding. Flames were spreading through the harbor district, and in their path stood a building that contained something irreplaceable, the sum of human knowledge. The Great Library of Alexandria, the ancient world's greatest repository of wisdom, was burning. Inside its walls were an estimated 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls, manuscripts that chronicled everything humanity had discovered, invented, and understood. Medical texts that could cure diseases we still struggle with today. This is the story of the library that held everything, and what humanity lost forever the day it burned. The Great Library of Alexandria was never meant to be just a library. It was the ancient world's first true research institution, a place where knowledge wasn't simply stored but actively pursued. Founded around 283 BC under the reign of Ptolemy II Philadelphus. Though possibly begun by his father Ptolemy I Soter, the library was part of a larger complex called the Mouseion, the Temple of the Muses, from which we get our word museum. This wasn't a quiet hall of dusty scrolls. It was a living, breathing center of scholarship where the greatest minds of the age lived, worked, and pushed the boundaries of human understanding. The Ptolemaic rulers of Egypt had a singular obsession. They wanted Alexandria to become the intellectual capital of the world, surpassing even Athens. To achieve this, they employed methods that ranged from generous to ruthless. Scholars were offered lavish stipends to relocate to Alexandria. The Ptolemies issued a decree that every ship docking in Alexandria's harbor had to surrender any scrolls on board. These texts were copied by the library's scribes, and while the originals were supposed to be returned, the library often kept the originals and sent back the copies. In one notorious incident, Ptolemy III borrowed the official state manuscripts of the great Athenian tragedies from Athens, leaving an enormous deposit as collateral. He had them copied, forfeited his deposit, kept the originals, and sent the copies back to Athens. This aggressive acquisition strategy meant that the library's collection grew at an unprecedented rate. Within its walls, the organizational systems we take for granted today were being invented. Callimachus of Cyrene, one of the library's earliest scholars, created the Pinax, a 120-volume catalog that was essentially the world's first comprehensive bibliography. He organized the library's holdings by subject and author, establishing classification systems that influenced how knowledge would be organized for millennia to come. This might seem mundane, but before Alexandria, there was no systematic way to organize large collections of texts. The library didn't just preserve knowledge. It created the infrastructure for how knowledge itself could be accessed and transmitted. The scholars who walked these halls were extraordinary. Eratosthenes, the library's third head, calculated the circumference of the Earth with remarkable accuracy using nothing but shadows, geometry, and pure reasoning. His measurement was within 2% of the actual value, an achievement that wouldn't be matched for centuries. He accomplished this around 40 BC by comparing the angle of the sun's rays at noon in Alexandria with those in Syene, modern-day Aswan, during the summer solstice. Using the distance between the two cities and basic trigonometry, he determined the Earth's circumference to be approximately 250,000 stadia, which translates to about 24,662 miles. The actual circumference is 24,901 miles. In an age when many civilizations still believed the Earth was flat, Eratosthenes not only proved it was round but measured it with stunning precision. Euclid taught and wrote at Alexandria, producing his Elements, a mathematical textbook that remained the standard for teaching geometry for over 2,000 years. The systematic, logical approach to mathematics that we still use today, building complex proofs from simple axioms, was formalized in that building. Hero of Alexandria invented the first steam engine, the El-Abbadi. Around 50 AD, it was treated as a novelty, a toy. But the principles it demonstrated, if pursued with the urgency of practical application, could have sparked an industrial revolution nearly 2,000 years before it actually occurred. The trajectory of human civilization would have been unrecognizably. Aristarchus of Samos proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system, placing the sun at the center, nearly 1,800 years before Copernicus. His work was known, discussed, and ultimately rejected by later astronomers who favored the geocentric model of Ptolemy, another Alexandrian scholar. But the knowledge existed. The correct understanding of our solar system was achieved, written down, and then lost. Galen, though he worked primarily in Rome, studied medical texts preserved at Alexandria and built upon Alexandrian medical knowledge. His writings on anatomy and physiology dominated medicine for 1,400 years. But Galen himself acknowledged that he was building on a foundation laid by earlier physicians whose works existed, primarily in Alexandria. The library contained the complete works of playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. We possess only a fraction of their plays today. Of Sophocles' 123 plays, only 7 survive complete. Of Euripides' approximately 92 plays, we have 18 or 19, the rest are lost, and many of them were last seen in Alexandria. These weren't just entertainment. Greek tragedy explored profound questions of justice, fate, human nature, and the relationship between mortals and gods, meton. Varsail in each lost play represents a unique perspective on the human condition that we can never recover. Historical texts that chronicled civilizations now vanished were shelved there. Monado, an Egyptian priest and historian who worked under Ptolemy II, wrote the Egyptiaca, a comprehensive history of Egypt from its earliest dynasties. Only fragments quoted by later authors survive. The original, complete work was in Alexandria. Berossus, a Babylonian priest, wrote the Babyloniaca, a history of Babylon and Mesopotamia. Again, only fragments remain. These texts were our primary sources for understanding ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian chronology and culture. Without them, entire periods of human history become fuzzy, debatable, or completely unknown. Scientific texts on astronomy, medicine, botany, and engineering filled entire wings. The library held detailed astronomical tables from Babylonian observers who had been recording celestial phenomena for over 1,000 years. Their observations were more comprehensive than anything Europeans would achieve until the Renaissance. Medical texts described surgical procedures, herbal remedies, and treatments for diseases. Some of these remedies, rediscovered in fragmentary references centuries later, have proven effective by modern standards. Others we'll never know about. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria wasn't a single event but a slow death by 1,000 cuts, spread across centuries. The popular image of the library burning in one catastrophic blaze is a simplification. The reality is more complex and, in some ways, more tragic because it was preventable at multiple points. The first major damage occurred during Julius Caesar's civil war in 48 BC. Caesar was in Alexandria. Entangled in the Egyptian civil war between Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII, when Ptolemy's forces attacked, Caesar set fire to Egyptian ships in the harbor to prevent them from being used against him. The fire spread beyond his control, reaching the docks and the nearby warehouses. Ancient sources disagree on how much of the library was damaged. Some claim the main library building itself burned. Others suggest it was warehouses containing scrolls intended for export or distribution that were destroyed. Estimates suggest that anywhere from 40,000 to 400,000 scrolls were lost in this incident alone. Even if the main library survived Caesar's fire, it was severely damaged. Mark Antony, in an attempt to compensate Cleopatra for the loss, gave her the entire 200,000-volume library of Pergamum. This suggests that the Alexandrian collection had been significantly depleted and needed replenishing. So by the time of Cleopatra's death in 30 BC, the library's collection had already suffered major losses and had been partially rebuilt with the Pergamum collection. The library continued to function for centuries after Caesar, but it was in decline. By the 3rd century AD, during the reign of Emperor Aurelian, Alexandria was caught in yet another civil war. In 272 AD, Aurelian's forces besieged the city and the Bruchion. The royal quarter where the library was located was destroyed. Contemporary accounts describe widespread destruction in that district. If the main library building survived Caesar's fire, it almost certainly didn't survive Aurelian's siege. However, there was a second library in Alexandria, the Serapeum, housed in the Temple of Serapis. This daughter library contained an estimated 42,800 scrolls and continued to function even after the main library's destruction. The Serapeum became a center for pagan learning and philosophy. It survived until 391 AD when the Roman Emperor Theodosius I issued decrees ordering the destruction of pagan temples throughout the empire. The Patriarch of Alexandria, Theophilus, led a Christian mob that destroyed the Serapeum. Contemporary Christian sources celebrate this as a victory over paganism. The philosopher and historian Socrates of Constantinople, writing shortly after, describes the destruction but doesn't specifically mention the library or its scrolls. This has led some historians to speculate that the library's collection had already been dispersed or removed before the temple's destruction. But other sources suggest that a significant collection of texts was indeed destroyed along with the temple. There's also a later, more controversial claim. Some Arab sources from the 12th and 13th centuries claim that the library, or what remained of it, was destroyed by the Muslim general Amr ibn al-As following the Muslim conquest of Alexandria in 641 AD, according to these accounts. When asked what to do with the books, Caliph Umar is said to have replied, "If these books are in agreement with the Quran, we have no need of them. And if these are opposed to the Quran, destroy them." The books were then supposedly used as fuel for the city's bathhouses, burning for 6 months. However, most modern historians regard this story as apocryphal. No contemporary sources mention this event, and the story first appears 6 centuries after the alleged incident, during a period of Crusader propaganda. Furthermore, earlier Muslim scholars who wrote about Alexandria, including visitors to the city, make no mention of a library, suggesting that it was already long gone by the time of the Muslim conquest. What's clear is this: by the 5th century AD at the latest, the Great Library of Alexandria, in all its forms, had ceased to exist. Whether it burned in a single catastrophic fire, was destroyed piece by piece across multiple conflicts, or gradually decayed through neglect and the dispersal of its collection, the end result was the same. The greatest accumulation of knowledge the ancient world had ever assembled was gone. So what exactly did we lose? The honest answer is, we don't fully know, and that's precisely what makes the loss so devastating. We can only piece together hints from surviving fragments, references in later texts, and catalogs that mention works no longer extant. But those hints reveal a staggering scope of lost knowledge. We lost complete medical texts that described surgical procedures and treatments that wouldn't be rediscovered for over a millennium. Ancient physicians performed cataract surgeries, amputations with surprisingly high survival rates, and developed anesthetics using combinations of plants. Some of their techniques, mentioned in passing by later authors, have only recently been validated by modern medicine. But the detailed manuals, the step-by-step procedures, the accumulated wisdom of generations of practitioners, all of that burned. We lost the complete works of the great playwrights. Imagine if we discovered even one lost play by Sophocles or Euripides today. It would be a literary sensation, analyzed and performed around the world. But we didn't lose one play. We lost over 100, perhaps several hundred, from the greatest dramatists of antiquity. Each one represented a unique work of art, a window into ancient thought and culture that we can never open. We lost historical texts that are now irretrievable. Monodos's complete history of Egypt would revolutionize our understanding of pharaonic Egypt. Berossus's history of Babylon would clarify much of early Mesopotamian chronology that remains debated and uncertain. Numerous other histories, biographies, and chronicles simply vanished. We're left trying to reconstruct ancient history from fragments, secondary sources, and archaeological evidence, always aware that comprehensive written accounts once existed but are now gone. We lost scientific and mathematical texts whose contents we can only guess at. References in surviving works mention books on optics, mechanics, advanced mathematics, and astronomy that no longer exist. Some of the mathematical techniques casually mentioned by later authors suggest that ancient mathematicians had achieved results that European scholars wouldn't reach until the Renaissance or later. The complete proof of these techniques, the thinking behind them, the applications they could have enabled, all lost. We lost philosophical texts from schools of thought that are now barely remembered. The ancient world had a rich diversity of philosophical traditions. We know the names of dozens of philosophers whose works were once widely read but survive now only in scattered quotations. Complete philosophical systems, ethical frameworks, metaphysical theories all vanished. The intellectual diversity of the ancient world was far greater than surviving texts suggest, but we've lost most of that diversity. Perhaps most tantalizingly, we lost texts from civilizations that we know almost nothing about. The library collected works from Egypt, Babylon, Persia, India, and beyond. It held texts in multiple languages, some of which are now extinct or undeciphered. What did the Phoenicians write about? What literature did the ancient Persians produce? What scientific knowledge did Indian scholars contribute? The library had answers to these questions, but those answers are gone. The loss wasn't just about specific texts. It was about continuity of knowledge. Ancient scholarship was cumulative. Scholars built on the work of their predecessors. And the library was the institution that made that possible by preserving and organizing previous work. When the library was destroyed, the chain of continuous intellectual development was broken. Later scholars didn't just lose access to old books. They lost the ability to build efficiently on ancient foundations. They had to rediscover things that were already known. They had to solve problems that had already been solved. Human progress was set back not by years or decades, but potentially by centuries. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria stands as perhaps the greatest single intellectual catastrophe in human history, not because of the physical loss of scrolls and papyrus, but because of what those texts represented, the accumulated knowledge, wisdom, and creativity of dozens of civilizations across more than 1,000 years. When those shelves emptied, humanity became collectively stupider, and we remain so to this day. We often speak of the Dark Ages as if they were an inevitable consequence of Rome's fall. But the darkness wasn't inevitable. It was the result of knowledge being lost, of texts being burned, of libraries being destroyed. The Library of Alexandria was the most catastrophic of these losses, but it wasn't the only one. Throughout the late ancient and medieval periods, countless texts were lost to fire, war, neglect, and deliberate destruction. What makes Alexandria's loss particularly poignant is that it was preventable. If Caesar had been more careful, if the Ptolemies had created backup collections in other cities, if later rulers had valued the library's preservation over religious or political conflicts, much could have been saved. But they didn't, and we live in the shadow of that failure. Today, we try to ensure this never happens again. Modern libraries create digital backups. Museums distribute collections across multiple locations. The Internet, whatever its flaws, has created a redundancy of information that makes complete loss far less likely. We've learned from Alexandria, but we learned it too late. The Library of Alexandria didn't just burn. A future burned with it, a future where humanity had continuous access to its own accumulated wisdom. We can never know for certain what that alternative timeline would have looked like, but we can mourn what might have been. Somewhere in those lost scrolls might have been the ideas that could have brought the Renaissance 1,000 years earlier. That could have sparked the scientific revolution in ancient Rome. That could have prevented centuries of disease and suffering through preserved medical knowledge. The library held everything, and we lost nearly all of it. That loss echoes through every gap in our historical knowledge, every rediscovered ancient technique that surprises modern scientists, every fragment of a lost play that hints at brilliance we'll never fully comprehend. Alexandria burned, and in its ashes, we're still searching for what we lost.